My name is Jennifer. I'm a 25-year-old working professional. Currently, I live with my grandmother and commute to work from her house. The reason I live with my grandmother is because my mother passed away from an illness. My mother got sick when I was 3 years old, and it seemed like there was no hope for her recovery. At that time, my father was apparently having an affair, despite my mother's illness. When my mother passed away when I was 5, my father must have found me a burden. He left me with his mother, my grandmother, and disappeared somewhere. Having no siblings and losing both parents, I ended up being raised by my grandparents. Feeling lonely, I would ask every day, "When will Dad come to pick me up?" But my grandparents would just give a bitter smile each time. Gradually, I understood that I had been abandoned by my father. Still, my grandparents, who were in their 50s at the time, raised me with all their might. My grandmother, who had been a housewife, started working part-time so I wouldn't starve. And she bought me beautiful clothes and toys. My grandparents must have been worried about their own retirement. But when I was about to take my high school entrance exam, my grandmother said this to me: "You don't have to be fixated on going to a public high school. Go wherever you want." "But if I do that, I'll be a burden on you and Grandpa." "It's okay. We still have some savings." "No, I'll try my best to get into a public high school. I'll definitely pass, so please support me." "All right, then you have to give it your all." And I successfully got into one of the top public high schools. My grandparents were happy for me, and my grandfather even made a reservation at a restaurant. I felt so fortunate to be celebrated by such kind grandparents. I enjoyed my high school life, but one day I came home to a somber atmosphere. I asked my grandmother what had happened, and it turned out that my grandfather had been diagnosed with an illness. His condition worsened rapidly, and he began going in and out of the hospital frequently. At that time, my grandfather had retired, so my grandmother had to support the family by working multiple part-time jobs. His hospital bills were covered by life insurance, but then my grandmother became unable to work due to exhaustion. That's when she decided to seek help from the government and went to the city office. Yes, she applied for public assistance. The process seemed very complicated, but somehow the application was approved. However, I spent my days wondering what would happen in the future. The high school I attended was a college prep school, so everyone went on to college. I was surprised to hear at the city office that welfare households could not go to college unless they separated their households. However, separating households also reduces the welfare benefits, which is tough. I wanted to go to college, but it was also difficult to go that far, so I decided to work as soon as possible to repay my grandparents. My grandmother tearfully said to me, "I'm so sorry this happened. It's all because of your father. It's because I didn't raise him properly." "It's not like that. Grandpa and Grandma took good care of me. I'll work hard, so don't worry." "I feel so pathetic. You wanted to go to college, and now I'm sorry." Then I got a job at 18. By that time, I was able to make a living without welfare. However, my grandfather's condition was already deteriorating, and he was told he only had a half a year left. In the end, he left me with these words: "Jennifer, I'm sorry for all the trouble." "Grandpa, it's not like that." "Please take care of your grandma." "I love you." "Grandpa!" After cremating my grandfather, I worked even harder. I worked a lot of overtime so my grandmother wouldn't have to work part-time anymore. Time flew by, and I turned 25. I was so busy every day that I didn't have time to have a boyfriend. Besides, I couldn't be proactive in love because I thought I might have a handicap from being abandoned by my father. Then one day, I got a call from someone. It was about my father, whom I hadn't been in touch with for a long time, had passed away. He died in a traffic accident. He was my biological father, but I didn't feel a shred of sadness. My grandmother didn't show any signs of sadness either, even though her own son had died. Well, maybe she was actually sad, but she might have hated her son for having an affair and leaving his child behind. It seems my father had told his remarried wife the address of our house. So his remarried wife came to visit our house and said this. Well, John has passed away, as we've already informed you, but now there's an issue with the inheritance. Would you mind relinquishing your inheritance rights? We don't have any children, so it turns out you also have rights, which is a problem for us. Well, that's fine. I never really thought of him as my father anyway. I don't need anything now. Great, so you'll relinquish. Wait, I'm not giving up my rights. What? I'm asserting my rightful claim. While it's true that I have mixed feelings about my son's death in a car accident, I can't say I'm not sad. But I'm much angrier that he abandoned young Jennifer to go to you. So, of course, I'll assert my rights. Is that all you wanted to say? Yes. Then please leave. My grandmother smiled at me and said, that was the right thing to do. And the woman left. Apparently, my father and his second wife had no children and lived a lavish lifestyle together. It seems my playboy father was quite the entrepreneur. He made a fortune in the real estate business. After that, my grandmother called a relative. He happened to be a lawyer. She seemed to be asking if he could mediate the inheritance issue, as she didn't want any conflict. Soon after, that relative uncle came to our house. He agreed with my grandmother. Inheritance disputes can get messy, but in this case, I think you're right, Grandma. Why? I don't want any of the money left by the father who abandoned me. It's tainted. But Jennifer, your grandma did her best to raise you. She put you first, above her own retirement plans. I know that. And don't you think she resents the woman who seduced her son? Don't you agree? I understand how you feel, Jennifer, but let's try to be more mature about this. Okay. I had been stubbornly refusing my father's inheritance, but I started to reconsider. Money they could have saved for their retirement. Raising me must have cost my grandparents a lot of money. They must have spent a lot of money to raise me, although I am sure they were saving for their retirement. They even sent me to tutoring classes in middle school and celebrated special occasions with me. Thinking about it that way, I decided to understand my grandmother's feelings, so I changed my mind and decided to claim my inheritance rights after all. When we informed the second wife, she was furious. In the end, it all comes down to money, even after someone's death. After carefully reconsidering, I've decided to claim my rights. What? I should have never told you people. It's too late now. We have a lawyer in our family, after all. You? How dare you pull such a sneaky trick? I don't want to hear about being sneaky. It's my legitimate right. You were abandoned by your parents, and now you act all high and mighty? Oh, it seems you're not aware that you were also played. What? Turns out, my father had other women as well. He didn't have children with them, though. Wait, what are you talking about? When my father passed away, a woman came demanding his inheritance like a fool. When we talked, surprise, surprise, she was his mistress. Can you believe it? She's a fool for claiming the inheritance while being his mistress. And she wasn't the only one. There were 3 of them. I was shocked, and my jaw dropped. No way. Well, at least they didn't have children. I'm going to claim a significant portion of the inheritance. That's my inheritance. No, don't be selfish. It's mine too, LOL. The remarried wife was sobbing. Of course she would be. The man she thought loved her faithfully had other women. I realized how much of a fool my father was. It's a good thing he didn't have children with them. In the end, I inherited my father's estate. At first, I didn't want anything from such a father, but I had to understand my grandmother's situation better. I gave the money to my grandmother saying, please use it for the future. I'm sorry for what I said before, but I realized something. It must have been hard raising me, right? I want you to use this money for your future. Jennifer, but I can't use all of it. It's okay. But what about when you get married someday? Save some of it for that. Grandma, don't worry about me. But then my feelings are, all I want is to see you happily married someday. Of course, it's fine if you don't get married too. Just live your life the way you want. You don't have to stay here forever. But what about you, Grandma? A year later, I met a wonderful man at a social gathering. We dated and we got married. When he proposed, I was thrilled. He understood my family situation and suggested we live together with my grandmother. I felt terrible, but he said, "Let's be good to your grandma." At the wedding, my grandmother cried her eyes out. I felt like I could finally repay her kindness that day. I'd be happy if I could become even more dependable and put my grandmother at ease in the future.